I love the quote by Tina Fey, who is most famous for her work on Saturday Night Live and for creating and starring in 30 Rock, who said, "There is something to be said for bombing so miserably on stage and realizing afterwards that you're okay and you didn't die." I call this being brave enough to bomb, and not only is it one of the B's in my 7 B's of fearless public speaking, but it is my antidote to perfectionism. So stay tuned, I am going to unpack being brave enough to bomb. Hi everyone, I'm Thea Fastbinder and welcome to Moxie Talk, where I help you find your voice, share your message, and lead with confidence. Today, I am going to unpack my theory on being brave enough to bomb. But before I do that, if you are watching me on YouTube, please make sure to hit that alert button so you get notified of any new content I put out. And if you enjoy this video, please make sure to share it, like it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I've always told my team at Moxie that any advice I give them or techniques I share with them are not done from a soapbox, but rather from the trenches. And then last week, I learned an old marketing adage that good marketers eat their own dog food, which means that in order to successfully market your own product, you must also be a consumer of it. And then I started thinking about these two ideas and how they relate. So eating your own dog food means that you must be a consumer of your own goods. And in my case, the goods are a proven methodology that I've honed for over a decade. And not only do I eat this dog food and continue to eat this dog food, but I have trained 40 plus Moxie coaches and trainers who also eat the dog food. And collectively, we have trained hundreds of thousands of people who also eat the dog food. And one of the main ingredients in this so-called dog food is the notion of being brave enough to bomb. And this is really a notion that is an antidote to perfectionism. And I, too, am a perfectionist. I actually refer to myself as a recovering perfectionist. So I want to share with you some of the evidence that I've learned about perfectionism. And the evidence really backs up this idea that being brave enough to bomb is the only way to improve at anything really difficult, and that favoring progress and process matters way more than being perfect. One of the main researchers is a man named Thomas Curran, and he is a psychologist at the London School of Economics and an expert in perfectionism. And he and his team have synthesized decades of data on perfectionism, and it reveals some surprising insights. One of those findings is that the way that perfectionists are built makes them very sensitive and vulnerable to setbacks and failures, because it's a threat to that idealized version of who they want to be and who they think they should be and who they think other people want them to be. Now, of course, this creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry and stops perfectionists from taking risks and stops them from pushing themselves forward. Perfectionists are very careful about what situations they do and don't place themselves in, and what things they do and don't push themselves towards. And the scariest part of this is that perfectionists don't necessarily succeed in the long run. That terrified me. And personally, I have found it helpful to counteract my perfectionist strivings by saying to myself, I want to make this as close to perfect as possible, and then it will be good enough. This is way more constructive, and it helps me avoid the burnout that's so common with perfectionists. Because most perfectionists have this cycle of self-defeat, and they are hyper vigilant about how other people perceive them and how they're performing. And that is a lot of mental energy, just trying to uphold that image that you want other people to see in you. And perfectionists are much more likely to undermine themselves by saying, I don't want to know that I'm not capable of doing this thing, so I might as well just not try to do it. And I used to be guilty of this as well. Now, Curran says that he sees this a lot in his research. Perfectionists hold off their effort after they failed the first time. They're basically saving face. They're just saying, I can't fail at something I don't try. And so that's not to say that they don't put loads of effort into something. It's just saying that they're very strategic about where that effort is placed. And it's very often placed in areas where there's a very high chance of success and away from areas where there's a very high chance of failure. So overcoming perfectionism really boils down to this relationship we have with our own failure. Failure is the great taboo to perfectionists. There are some very real pressures that we all feel, and that creates a sense that we must hide our failures, right? That we need to not let anyone know when we have failed. And the problem with that is that we are going to fail. And we are going to fail many, many times at something that is difficult and that anything that means something to us. And anything that is difficult to achieve is going to come with big and small failures. So I personally love the idea of a fail forward or a fail better movement, which means sitting comfortably with failure. And it's not an easy thing to do. And it's really a brave thing to do, because then you'll begin to see that you can still have high standards and you can still shoot for really high goals, but you can do this without the emotional baggage that comes with perfectionist tendencies. So you can't allow your failures to sit and fester. You have to recycle them into growth. And you need strategies for dealing with your perfectionism. So here are 3 strategies that I've adopted to normalize my own mistakes and failures. So personally, I've found it very helpful to adopt anti-perfectionism. And I adopt instead the ship it mentality, that it's good enough and that I will accept that I will fail small hundreds of times per year, and I'm going to fail big several times per year. It's my fail quota, if you will. So whether it's having a proposal rejected or a workshop bomb or a keynote fall flat, it's a sign that I'm pushing myself to try new things. And when I crash and burn, I can check it off as one of my expected fails for the year. So that's technique number 1. Another technique that I use is to measure my excellence in terms of my progress towards a goal. Sure enough, psychologists find that one of the liabilities of perfectionism is being obsessed with maintaining your image. If you focus instead on working towards mastery of your own goals, you can stay motivated to keep bettering your own best. A perfectionist is always going to think that everything they do is worse than anyone else. And they're going to point out what went wrong and what needs to be fixed immediately. But it's important to remember that you did some things well, and the clearer you are about what your personal best looks like, the easier it is to improve it. Technique number 3. It's really difficult to judge our own performance, which brings me to a very important part of counteracting our perfectionism tendencies, which is to find a group of advisors that you trust. So here at Moxie, I put all of my content creation in front of certain people to critique and give feedback. And sure, it's sometimes hard to hear the feedback, but I trust these people, and I know that they have my best interests at heart. And because I know that I'm my own worst critic, I listen to their feedback most of the time about what's good and what needs improvement. So ultimately, success is less about how close you've come to perfect and more about the struggles you've managed to overcome. Now, although I did spend years beating myself up for my Broadway bombing, I did eventually return to acting. And when I was brutally honest with myself, it didn't fulfill me anymore. All of the auditions, the rejections, the being surrounded by people that were oftentimes much better actors than I was. It took a toll, and after a few more roles that I got to play and a lot more roles that I didn't get to play, I left acting. But all of those failures and my acceptance of those failures and my sitting with the pain of those failures and then dusting myself off and getting back up has made me a much better thought leader, a much better coach and trainer, and definitely a much better CEO. So instead of beating myself up about not pursuing a life as an actor, I have reframed my story for myself, that the only way I could get to where I am today was to fail, and that the only way I'm going to achieve the next huge achievements at Moxie will include many more failures. So the next time those old perfectionist tendencies begin to creep back into your brain, try to remind yourself of Tina Fey's words and be brave enough to bomb. I hope you found this video valuable. If you did, please make sure to like it and share it with a colleague or friend or family member that also would find it valuable. And please make sure to check out what we do at Moxie Institute. We can be found at moxieinstitute.com. And until next time, be sure to live boldly, lead brilliantly, and speak with Moxie.